maybe. Hey, I'm at home now, man. So dude, I'm telling you, that last one, like my sound was horrible. I wish, I don't know if it sounded that bad when we were recording, but I don't
Eh,
remember my AirPods
it
sounding
did.
that bad before.
It
It
did. It
was
sounded that bad, and all the bunch of listeners got all spoiled. They don't remember what it was like episodes 1 through 10, and they're like, "Man, Roger sound sucks.
Hey,
Roger
that's what we got to
sound
do is
sucks."
we got to take them back every now and then, right? It's the
That's right.
the C3 appreciation episode. So we gotta take them back a couple what I guess about a year and a half now.
That's right. Make them appreciate the production team that we have behind us these
That's
days.
right.
Heck yeah,
Damn
man.
straight.
Probably overpaid and underworked.
Yep.
So Luke, have you been watching? I know Josh doesn't watch, so I'm not even going to ask him. You been watching any of the tournament at all?
No, I just haven't had a chance to sit down and watch it, and it's killing me. I watched, I don't know, 10, well, maybe 20 minutes of the Kansas Arkansas game last night, and then left with 2 minutes to go. It looked like a close game, and then Arkansas ended up pulling out the upset. I saw that Joe Biden picked Arizona to win it all.
It's just like his cabinet, dude. Every one of his picks turns into hot garbage. If I was Arizona, right when he picked, he's like, they should have just called him like, "Hey man, would you mind like picking somebody else? Pick,
Ugh.
Kansas or something like that." I've actually caught more games than I thought. I'm actually the funny thing is I'm more interested in it now because my beloved Tar Heels did not make the tournament this year, so there's really no reason for me to watch. However, with Kansas losing, Duke losing, Purdue, and Kentucky, pretty much the four teams that I hate in life. Now it's actually pretty interesting to me because I don't really care who wins. I mean, I think of everybody left. You've got what Alabama, San Diego State, Princeton, Houston, Miami, Indiana, Xavier, Texas. I can live with any of those teams winning this tournament. I think I can live with that. Maybe not Texas. I don't think Luke's a big Texas fan, right?
Yeah, not Texas, man. Yeah, so I'm in Austin watching South by Southwest. Yeah,
Oh Lord.
it reminds me how much. I mean, God, this town is changing so fast, man. I mean, really fast. It's different than even what y'all probably remember. It's I don't even know how to describe it. It's getting this LA feel to it. Uh, and folks like Joe Rogan and Michael Malice and all that, they get on there like, man, Texas is great. Oh, this place is awesome. But I'm telling you, those guys, as much as I, like and admire Joe Rogan, he still needs that like LA feel to a place. So he wants the best of
Sure.
both worlds. And right now, he's getting the best of both worlds. Just looking at people walking and driving around Austin, you get that Texas feel to it. Not the traffic's not as bad. People who say the traffic's bad in Austin are insane. It's not bad compared to LA, compared to Jersey, places like that, or even Houston. And you still have that remnant of friendliness around here, but the closer you get to the campus and like the hipster areas, downtown, the weird isn't the right word. Hipster is not even the right word. It's just like this LA Hollywood feel. I don't know. People rude, kind of looking down their nose. I don't know. Just Austin. I can't imagine living here. It's
It's big city life, man. It's like
yeah,
you're exactly right. It's like the LA, New York, big city. I live in the city. You're just a stupid, rural country boy. You're just a ranch dude or a farm guy or something like that. You don't know what it's like to have electricity and running water and plumbing.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think if you guys make it down to Texas, just hop up to Austin. I would like to go to Joe Rogan's club. His club is open now. The Comedy Mothership, I think he's calling it. But I looked into getting tickets just on a whim. Yeah, that's impossible. It's not going to happen. It's really hard to get tickets to that for a few years, and it's open every night. Every night, he's got people up there. So, congratulations to
Plus,
him.
he's
But
got FU money.
oh
It's a
yeah,
different ball game no matter where you're at. When you've got that kind of money, your perspective is a lot different than everyday American citizen living. Right? It's like you want the freedom, but you want to have all the conveniences and the high end stuff. Well, yeah, when you're worth $200 million, I mean, yeah, you can kind of get that wherever you want. You're just trying to go somewhere where you're going to pay, the least amount of taxes as possible.
yeah. Josh, when's the last time you were in Austin?
Last time I was in Austin, I want to say it was 2015. I believe 2015. Last time I was in Austin, and even then, I described it in 2015 as the Berkeley of Texas.
It still
is
is.
is how somebody asked me. They were like, "Well, what was it like?" I said, "The Berkeley of Texas." That's the best way I can put it. Um, it was, yeah, the downtown area, outside the downtown area, was fantastic. It was, it was good. It was what I expected, Texas to be. And I mean, I lived in San Antonio for a while, when we were, there at Fort Sam, and but the downtown area, bro, you could have it. We went down, to the downtown area, and it was absolute. It was hot garbage. It was absolute hot garbage.
So Josh, so
So
for every state, when did they start coming? Like we all know that your major cities, they've always, most of them have been Democrat for a long time, and it's just urban areas and this and that. But like this whole Berkeley vibe, it seems like every state now is getting a city, or a city is popping up that is starting to go. I don't even know how to explain it. Kind of like Luke was going down that road with it. It's not a hipster thing, but it is truly the Berkeley vibe. Like when did that start? Because you're starting to see them pop up everywhere now, like one per state, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, we have it here in North Carolina. It's Asheville.
Yeah,
Asheville
yeah, exactly.
is the Berkeley of North Carolina. I don't know when that started. Maybe after somewhere between 2010 and 2015 is kind of when, when it went that way for Asheville. I can't speak to Austin or anywhere else. But Colorado, it happened sooner in Colorado with Colorado Springs, and
I
I
don't know.
don't under.
Boulder, man. It's always kind of been
Was
Boulder.
Boulder the first one to go like that?
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah, I've never been to Boulder, so I don't know, but every state definitely has them. In Florida, they're and Florida's weird because it's always been 4 different geographic regions, really.
Florida's
Anyway,
weird.
yeah, yeah, no shocker. Um, Tallahassee, bro, my hometown, like it's becoming the Berkeley of Florida in a lot of ways. Leon County is blue, like it's solid blue,
It's weird.
and yeah,
It's
it's
really weird.
bizarre because
Tallahassee. Hmm.
yeah, so Tallahassee is solid blue, and it has been for a very very long time. Leon County blue, and which is weird because they're in the Panhandle, and the majority of the Panhandle, other than downtown Jacksonville, is pretty red. Like it's pretty red. Like it's a lot of good old boys trailer parks and pickup trucks in the Panhandle. You don't get into that, that Florida, pastel colors and Florida sunshine living until you get down to Central Florida, and that's just kind of like God's waiting room. So, you know, uh, I don't know when it happened in a lot of other states, though, man. But it's happened. Every state has it. And you're right. It's bizarre, and I don't get it.
It's
Bozeman is becoming it for Montana because all the
is
people in California selling their their 1,000 square foot home with 2 bedrooms and 1 bath and going up to Montana and Bozeman and buying 50 acres and a 5,000 square foot house for what
Bastards.
they paid for their house there, and
so
so
it's
they're ruining Montana.
for Arizona. It's Bisbee though, right?
Well, see, and that's the difference, because I guess you also have to have there's a certain population. Like Bisbee's always been that way. Prescott's always been that way, but there's smaller towns and they really haven't grown. I'm talking about like when you look at like your Asheville's, your Austins, your Bozeman's, they've had these population booms, and majority of it seems to be, maybe it's anecdotal, maybe it's just what I read and what you see on the news or whatever, but it is that Berkeley vibe, and there's I think the difference, having been to several of those places, at least I think I can speak for like the Bisbee, Prescott. It don't get me wrong, they're left of center, but there's almost a libertarian vibe to it. The just leave me alone, man. Just let me do my thing and leave me alone. And when I look at, and I haven't been to Austin in years, but when you look like Asheville, and the last time I was in Austin, there was definitely more of a political left lean to it, or attitude that is very prevalent, as opposed to because I don't know if anybody in Bisbee would say I'm a Democrat. I just, I don't know if anybody in Prescott would actually say that, right? But they are definitely not on the right side of the line. So I think there's a fine line there between your smaller towns and then some of those that are starting to have these population booms. I'm just kind of wondering why all of it. It seems like in the last several years that you're starting to see them pop up throughout the states. So it makes me wonder. It's like, well, are people moving from other parts of the state to that city for that reason? Because you, me, same,
No,
same, or is there something else?
I don't think so. I think it's Well, maybe there's an aspect of that. I won't say I don't think so. Shouldn't have said those words, but I think maybe in the past 10, even 20 years since the 2000s, especially with the market crash in '07, '08, maybe we're seeing a new type of nomadic type thing, where you're going from, and it goes back to what the conservatives always say. The liberals, they trash their own cities, they vote these people in, they trash their own state, and then they move out and do it to another state. I'm sure there's a little bit of aspect of that. Same with city type stuff. In Austin, people will move outside of the city, like to Green or something like that. San Antonio, they'll move to Green, and then they'll do the same thing. They'll make it at first a tourist trap, have some cool bands there and, hipster vibe. And then they end up just, regulating the city into garbage. So maybe it's like a nomadic trend in our lifetimes that we're witnessing, and we don't really see it, because it's moved so slow and this and that. I don't know. Deep thoughts, right?
Hey, so Luke, the real question is, while you're there in Austin, you're not that far from Lockhart, Texas. And so, yeah, I know I've already told you, but I'm going to tell you again, just so the listeners can hear it in case they're ever in the area. So, when I was out in Texas, it was a couple of years ago now, out hanging out with Admiral Dave, and who we've had on the show in the past. When I was getting ready to head back to the East Coast, Admiral Dave did me a solid, and I wanted, man, I'm a fat kid and I love food, and I definitely love barbecue, right? And so he goes, "You need to go to Lockhart, Texas." He said that's where a lot of people in Texas go for their, go to get barbecue. They make that, it's like the Hajj. Folks travel to Lockhart, Texas from all around, and so if you get a chance, man, go to Lockhart. There's a place called Smitty's. It's where I stopped at. There's another place called Black's that smell just as good. They're right downtown Lockhart, Texas. And Lockhart's not that big of a town. Like it's, you got the county courthouse or, right there in the center of it. And you can't, you could probably stand in the middle and you can see the entire place. But the smell of barbecue kind of it permeates the entire town. And no matter where you park down there, you're going to smell it. And Smitty's it was the hands down the best brisket I've ever had in my life.
Wow. You need to get down there and try some more.
Did you go?
No, I went to Black's last night, but yeah, I mean, there's Smitty's, Snow's, Black's. You just go down the list. I mean, they're. I don't know. It's all subjective, right? It's all subjective. What do you always say about bourbon?
Sure.
What's the right way to drink bourbon? The way you like
however
it.
You want it.
Yeah. It's just, barbecue, but these places that, Smitty's, Snow's, Black's, and a couple of other names are escaping me right now. They're all pretty close, like that picture I sent you guys last night of that dino rib, that was Black's, right? And
nice.
it was really good. Boy, it was expensive though. We paid for it. Holy cow. I looked at the folks we went with last night, Grant and Deanne. Shout out to Grant for letting me crash his house there. They're very, very great guests. But we went and all, they paid for theirs, we paid for ours. When I saw the bill, I was like, "Whoa, wow!" I was not expecting that. Must be the beef rib I got, And then we got back to the table. I was like, "Wow, we for all four of us, we paid the same last night at Mexican food place." And they were like, "Yeah, ours was the same price." And I was like, "Damn!" But anyway, I'm saying it's subjective because as good as that beef rib was, like the meat quality, as far as beef ribs go, the meat quality was probably the best. The way it was cooked, though, I've had them cooked better than that, right? There was a place in Slovenia, believe it or not, Slovenia. It was the only barbecue place in the whole country, and they took it very seriously. They traveled to Kansas City. They do these competitions and everything, and they had a beef rib that was cooked perfectly. They smoked that thing for 18 hours. You had to order it a day before. And the meat quality wasn't as good as what I had last night, but I prefer that overall. Like if I had a choice between the two, I would choose the one in Slovenia, which, Josh, by the way, that damn COVID shut that barbecue restaurant down. The only one in Slovenia that I know of that was any damn good shut it down.
Did it shut it down permanently?
Yeah, because they had kind of just opened, and you could tell they had spent a lot of money to get it open, and even that all the handouts the government was giving over there wasn't enough to
Oh,
for
that
them to keep
sucks.
their doors open. But yeah, I'll have to try
Yeah.
that Smitty's, man. But you got to come back down here and try some more. Um, try some different places and tell me what you think, especially snows and blacks. You got to try those and like compare them. Blacks, honestly, I don't know, dude. I don't know. It was really good, but Rudy's. Y'all heard of Rudy's?
Yeah.
Okay, Rudy's is kind of a
So
chain. Rudy's is really good for a chain.
Rudy's is very good. Yeah. So funny story about Rudy's. So I lied to you when I said 2015 was my last time in Austin. Well, yeah. So I went TDY. I was TDY out to Fort Hood. I don't know, man. It was probably like 20. Yeah, it was 2016. Into 2016, I went TDY to Hood because Third Corps was getting ready to push the Corps headquarters over to Iraq, and so we went out. Yeah, for real. So we went out to do some liaison, meeting with them and stuff like that. And because obviously we had our folks there at the same time, and so we went out there and we were leaving Fort Hood, and we went up to Waco, and we stopped in there, and you'll probably say this is Jag, but we stopped because it was with a group of folks. We stopped into Waco and went to what's the folks who do the
Chip
home
and
remodel
Joanna.
stuff.
Chip and Joanna.
Yeah,
I can't think.
yeah,
I
yeah.
can't think of their
Magnolia.
brand. Magnolia. Yeah.
Magnolia. So we went to their place and checked it out, and we were like, okay, let's go. And we were flying out of Austin, so we were like, okay, well, let's go stay down, in Austin near the airport. So because we had an early flight back, because of course coming back east, all the flights you either get in at you either leave at 6, 5 or 6 in the morning, and you get in a decent hour, or you leave at noon and you get in at midnight. And so we were literally filling up with gas. We were filling the rental car up with gas, and I was like, "Why do I smell barbecue?" I was like, "There's nothing near us except for this gas station," and I was like, "But it smells incredible." And I was sitting there looking around. I was smelling. I just made the comment. I was like, I smell barbecue. And some dude, some Texan filling up his truck over there. He was looking at me with some level of disgust, on his face. And he was like, "Yeah, it's inside the gas station, guy. Go check it out." And we went in there, and we didn't know Rudy's was a chain or anything like that. We just thought it was Texas gas station barbecue, and we were amazed that gas station barbecue was that good. And it was just like, holy shit! Like this is actually this is really good for gas station barbecue, and that's how I discovered Rudy's.
It's pretty hard to jack up barbecue, though. I mean, I don't know that I've had. You've got good barbecue and better barbecue. I don't know I've ever had like bad barbecue.
I've had bad barbecue,
dude. My wife and I have jacked up some brisket a couple times, like in the past few months, because I told you guys that I bought some of those brisket pieces, right? Because you can get a little smaller deal. You don't have to cook a whole, whole brisket. I was like, I'll do these up right. And I did them on the slow cooker. I told you, remember? And I did it just right. I don't know what I did right. I did a little rub on it, put it in there, had some liquid, absorbed it, and it was just right. And I was like, shit. I was thinking to Roger, man, this is easy. It is impossible to screw up. So my wife was doing it, and she's an awesome cook. I mean, let me preface with that. Anyone who's had her cooking knows she's good. And I must have told her wrong in the slow cooker, because when she does it like in the oven or on flame low and slow, it's fall apart delicious. But she puts it in the slow cooker. I must have told her wrong, because it was not good. It was like beef jerky. It was so bad. She goes, I don't know what I did. I was like, I must have told you wrong. And then the next time I did it wrong. And then most recently she did it again, did it right. So, I mean, it is possible to screw up, but you got to be pretty stupid. You gotta, it's too high, I think, is the thing. Cooking it too high, you're going to screw it up. And that's what we were doing.
Luke
too high or not long enough.
Luke looked like Clark Griswold on Christmas Vacation eating a dry ass turkey.
Oh.
Dunking it in water.
Now, my thing lately, dude, has been burn ins, man. I've been buying the Costco pork butt. And I've been, they come in 2-packs. And it's just, especially for us now around here, it's just, you can't cook a whole one, because you'll end up throwing half of it away or giving it away or whatever. So I've just been cutting them up into like these little 2-inch slabs. and then from there cut them up into like little half-inch by half-inch cubes or whatever. Dude, I throw that stuff in a marinade, throw them on the smoker, just fantastic. And then pour them in a big ass bowl with a couple toothpicks, and me and the wife would just sit there and pick at it for 2, 3, 4 hours until they're gone. I mean, it's fantastic.
Did either one of y'all ever have some of our former Pizzo, Sean and Greg? You guys ever have any of their barbecue? Because they were going to competitions and they were winning. They were doing pretty well in those barbecue competitions out in Texas for a while.
No, I'm
I
never
think I
going
had
to
some
eat.
of.
No, never going to eat Greg's Italian brisket. It's not going to happen. I have no
Well, I
idea.
It's
had
Italian
some of
brisket.
Sean's ribs, but you know what the difference is? Because so we've got some neighbors down here, and they do a big time rib cook off every year. It's a pretty big deal. A lot of people come, and it's all day and whatever. But there is a difference, and I don't know about brisket and everything else. I'm just talking about pork ribs. But there is a very big difference with pork ribs as far as what is competition grade and what we actually like to like. Fall off the bone would be last place in competition ribs. It's it's got to have some substance to it. There's got to be a pull when you bite it, and I don't know all the intricacies to it, but basically things like to us would be like, man, this is a fantastic rib. Would end up in last place in a rib competition.
It's because we're uncultured, man. But
Yeah, maybe.
I'm telling you, in Texas, pork is not a thing. It's just pork barbecue, not a thing. You can find it. You find it more in sausage. But like any of these places, any of these places that we're mentioning, even Rudy's, there ain't no pork in there. It's poultry, beef. Except for the sausage, there may be a little pork.
I grew up off pork barbecue, man. That's that's a big North Carolina thing. I grew up off pork barbecue
I
everywhere.
didn't say, yeah, pork barbecue it's a southern, like it's a I should say
Smithfield,
southeastern,
shit.
like it's a southeastern thing. Because like pork barbecue, that was all we had growing up. I mean, it was pork barbecue, and it was basically like, I mean, now granted, when I growing up, my good barbecue, and I'm throwing up some air quotes when I say good, was literally Sonny's. Right, you would go to Sonny's, and I would get their barbecue pork sandwich on their garlic bread and a side of fried okra, and man, dude, that was heaven for me. Like that right there, I was like, dude, this doesn't get any better. Like this is peak. This is what they're gonna serve when I make it. If I make it to the pearly gates, is they're gonna be like, here's your Sonny's barbecue pork sandwich on Texas toast and fried okra.
Dude, first time I was at Bragg, we went out to get barbecue. We're going to this barbecue place, so good. And we went to this barbecue place. I ordered a barbecue sandwich. I bite into it. I was like, the hell is this? Like, it's barbecue, isn't it good? Because it was that yellow, the mustard-based sauce instead. And I'm like, yeah, this isn't barbecue. And they're like, no, it is. This is barbecue. You guys in Texas, you got to realize there's more barbecue than just what y'all make. I'm like, well, yeah, there's Kansas and there's Missouri and there's Texas, and that's about it. And they're like, no, dude, this is that Carolina barbecue.
And you got to do coleslaw or potato salad on top of it in the sandwich and bite into it.
And it's good. You just got to get used to it. It's a different thing, but it's the same idea. Meat on a flame.
All right, now you MFers are making me hungry. We got to talk about something else. I'm sure Josh already had like third dinner, but you know what? You said how many inches did you say you've lost off your waist?
Last Hampshire, like 3.
Yeah, that's incredible, man. How long?
Maybe like, I don't know, probably like 6 weeks, 7 weeks.
Man,
dude, that's incredible.
Down to a 42-inch waist, man. Congratulations.
Yeah, you're not far off. Yeah. No, man, like I said, it was just so the great thing about working, the great thing about working from home is that I'm at home, I don't have to wait until lunchtime to eat. I can, I don't have to, let me sneak out of my cube farm to, go grab a snack. Like I can just walk through, I go let the dog out or something like that. Like I walk through the kitchen and I can grab something. The worst thing about working from home is that I can walk through the kitchen anytime I want to and grab something. Right. And so I'm just like, I'm like some big heifer just, grazing constantly during the day. Right. And, but you don't think about it. You just really don't think about it. So it's like be like a handful of pretzels here. It's like, oh, let me make myself a sandwich real quick, and then I'm gonna eat lunch too. And so after a while, man. But once I stopped doing that. Again, I kind of went back to drink a gallon of water to every day. Stop grazing. Take my body weight in and protein. Limit myself to X number of fat grams, X number of grams of carbs a day. And you guys see my number, it's been sharing a lot of that stuff. And then it's, it's working out actually, coming up, following a plan, working out. And so I've been following a workout plan. I walk the dog. Most days I walk the dog twice, so I'll take him out in the mornings, and then the wife and I will go out on a walk in the evenings. And so that's, that's 2 miles each. So that's 4 miles a day, just walking, and then again, it comes down, and I've heard it 100 times, and you can't out train a bad diet. Like you can
Yeah.
do whatever you want, but if you're grazing all day and not paying attention to what you're eating, like you're you're never gonna get ahead. So, no, man, it's been good. Yesterday though, so Thursday and Friday, I was slammed. It's just my day was just slam, especially with work and stuff. Like I didn't even get up from my desk, other than to go hit the head, uh, from about 8 in the morning to like 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and by then, man, I'm just mentally just done. And I hate I hate working out after dinner. Like I can't do it. Like it's just
Yeah, that's tough.
I absolutely hate it. So I missed Thursday and Friday, and so I was like, okay. So I decided I was like, I'm gonna do the German uh, mass mass plan on Saturday, which is basically 10 sets of 10 reps. And so I threw like bench squat, over military press, bent over rows, and like deadlifts and barbell curls in there. So it was 10 sets, 10 reps of each of those. And so I was good. Like my legs felt dead. Like they felt like dead weight Saturday afternoon. Like I was just like going up the stairs and stuff at the house. It was just kind of like, just kind of like throwing my legs up. And then, bro, when I woke up this morning, my legs were like, I'm going to give you got about another 12 hours and you are going to be in the hurt locker. And so all day today, like they've been getting progressively more sore. So when I start when I go hit my workout tomorrow, it's a pull day because I'm doing a asynchronous pull push split, push pull push leg split. Um, I'm gonna pay for it next couple of days, man. Because they basically did 100 squats. They weren't heavy. They were only like at 155, so they weren't heavy. But it's
It's
a
still a
hundred
lot, dude.
reps. It's a
It's still a
hundred
lot.
reps. Like I mean, it was brutal. The worst part, dude. It took me a long time to finish that workout. Like it
Well,
was
it's a
like an hour and
long
forty
workout,
five
dude.
minutes. Yeah, it was like an hour and 45 minutes, almost 2 hours to get through everything. And I didn't eat any carbs before that or
Yeah.
anything like that, man. It was brutal. It was brutal. It took a lot of but it took a lot of will to get through that. But I've enjoyed it, man. Now I get to the point to where I like when I look forward to my daily workouts, and I feel like I legitimately feel bad, like physically, if I don't get it in.
Well, you're
Um,
seeing progress too. Once you see progress, it's like,
yeah,
okay, now I'm into it, and yeah,
yeah.
I think I finally found my what's going to work for me traveling because as everybody knows from the last crappy audio recording that I had, was traveling but what I did do was because that's always the toughest thing with the diet is traveling. You can never find anywhere to eat. So, you know what? I went to Walmart. I went to the frozen food section. I found like the little Atkins thing because they tend to be low in carbs and fairly high in protein. And dude, I literally bought like 12 meals, took them back to the hotel, and that's what I ate for lunch and dinner every day. Was these stinking Atkins meals? But you know what? It kept me on track. It kept me on target. It was better than hitting the Bojangles or the Popeyes or something like that. And I think in places I can get away from or get away with it, that's probably what's going to be my staple on the road
All right, so
if I can stick to it.
Josh promised. Well, he not promised. He warned he's going to go all Barbara Walters on us. He said he had all these deep questions and all this stuff. So, what was it, Josh? Just hit us with it, man. I mean, I don't know how deep I'm feeling today, but try to make it happen.
I don't know, man. I mean, I wasn't really feeling it today. 'Cause when I brought it up last time, you guys both ridiculed it and stuff. So I mean, I figured we just skip over it, and
We didn't ridicule it. Come on.
I figured we just talk about the normal things that we talk about. We talk about the SVB bank collapse, which is however old by now, and nobody's even talking about it anymore. Like that's old news, and stuff. Uh, but to start with, and I guess I'll start with this, and and this one was kind of of YAG, but I think it was good. I thought it was pretty good. I saw a tweet. Somebody was like, 8 movies. If somebody didn't know you, but they wanted to know something about you before they engage you in conversation, what would be like the 8 movies they need to see to okay, this is that person, right? So I'm gonna go through my list, and I'm gonna ask both of you guys chime in with your 8 movies that somebody would need to be familiar with to know you as a person, right? And then we'll get into the more Barbara Walters stuff right after that. So for me, thinking about it, it would have to be Red Dawn, the original, not that shitty remake, The Outlaw Josie Wales, Platoon, the Godfather series, Casablanca, Dancing with Wolves. Stop laughing, Luke. Falling Down. And yes, this is not a movie, but it it spoke to me, the 1883 series. Like I would have to say those would be my 8 things that if you wanted to get to know me as a person that you hadn't talked to me yet, you watch those, you probably got a pretty good idea who I am.
Well, I was laughing because your first one is my first one. And you had another one on there too.
We're not so different, you and I.
I didn't write down 8. I wrote down more than 8, and I didn't give it like a whole lot of. I didn't think about it too deeply. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's fine.
I went down the list, and
read them all.
Okay, The Notebook, Gleaming the Cube, Breaking 2, Gigli. No, I'm joking. No.
You're so dumb.
No, I make this list. You make your list too, but somebody would look at that list and be like, "What?" I mean, they would know that you like those movies, but you probably pulled more out of those movies than just the surface level enjoyment aspect of it, right? And that's kind of how I made this list. I mean, some of these movies formed me in the way I thought about things. It's a little bit, the meaning is a little bit esoteric, right? It's not, there's more meaning in those movies to me than just your surface level. Oh, Red Dawn, it's about a bunch of kids who go in the mountains and fight off the Russian invasion. There's more to it than that, right? Outlaw Josie Wales, 1883. Oh, well, Josh just wants to be a cowboy. It's not that. It's whatever. So let's go down the list here. Some I wrote down, and I like your 1883 and Outlaw Josie Wales. I like those two. I weren't on my list, but those are 2 good ones. So I got Red Dawn, The Dark Knight, Casablanca, First Blood, Predator, Black Hawk Down, Spy Game, Fight Club, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Rio Bravo, Last of the Mohicans. And lately, one that's kind of been standing out to me is one that may surprise you. It's a movie called Michael Clayton with George Clooney. Did you guys ever see that?
No.
It's about a lawyer. It's not a great movie, but it's about a lawyer who's a fixer for a pharmaceutical company. And it's just about how crooked they are and everything, and how much is going on behind the scenes and all this stuff. And it's like, I guess if someone wanted to know about something about me lately, Michael Clayton might be on that list, because that's a good movie. Y'all should check it out. And Michael Clayton, I think, is on either HBO Max or Netflix. But like Roger, like that movie, The Dark Knight, right? It's not just about Batman. Everybody likes Batman, but like some of the themes in that movie about the public turning their back on the hero, and the hero can't be the good guy. I think that 3 of us and a whole lot of people, during those dark times, Afghanistan and Iraq, kind of felt like that. We weren't spit on or anything like that, but like the soldiers in Vietnam and things like that. But sometimes, some people say the Dark Knight was a metaphor for George W. Bush and, the Patriot Act and all that stuff. And the difference is, when Batman was done at the end of the Dark Knight, he deleted all the stuff he had to do so that that power, you know, to surveil an entire population wouldn't be there anymore. But it had to be done in that moment. It had to be done. So I don't know. That was a complex movie. It's more than just about, you know, the Joker and Batman and all that stuff. And I don't know. We could talk about this for a while, really. So I don't know if Roger, if you gave it any thought, or this is probably just a bunch of movies come off the top of your head.
Yeah, it's funny because you say it's like it was interesting. I wanted to go deeper into it, but I think I was busy when Josh sent the text out, because it's not like, hey, if you watch these 8 movies, kind of like what you were saying, if you watch these 8 movies, you're going to know me. Like, this is me because you've watched this. But there are certain aspects, whether it's a theme, whether it's a character, whatever it is, of those movies that you relate to, whether you really like it, you really hate it, whether it helps, maybe it defines some part of your personality, defines some part of your life, or how you want to be or how you want to see yourself, or whatever. So anyway, no particular order. Uh, and most of these, I need to actually run these by my wife, because she knows when any of these pop up, when you hit guide and they pop up, it's like, oh yeah, we're not going any farther than that. This is what we're watching. And there might be 24 minutes left of that. That's what we're going to watch until the end of it. So I think I had a little bit more than 8, just throwing a couple out there. Shawshank Redemption, the Supermans, love all the Superman movies. It's and I'm not a big comic guy or anything like that, but I'm a little scared with was it James Gunn or whatever his name is in the DC universe, and where this thing's going next. I'm sure we got some comic book nerds out there that can probably educate me on that. But all the old Supermans, like those, Full Metal Jacket, Platoon. I like all your typical war movies, Apocalypse Now, that type of stuff. The Beach, one of my favorites, man. It's one of those things that with Leonardo DiCaprio, one of those things that when that comes on every time, I'm watching it. My dog hates it because of the sound of the water. But Outlaw, Josie Wales, High Plains Drifter, any of that era of Clint Eastwood movies, he did like 3 or 4 right there. Any of those I think were fantastic. Falling Down again, Schindler's List, Inception, and what I haven't thrown on here, because I love horror movies, but I couldn't think of a fairly recent within like last couple of days. Now I know some of these are a couple decades old, but there hasn't been like a really good horror movie. It seems like since my teenage years, right? It seems like I was 16, 17 when, back in the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, I was a big Nightmare on Elm Street guy. I love those things. Yeah, Scream 6 is coming. Dude, I hate every one of those Screams. I think I've seen one, maybe one half of one, and was done with that. But I like scary movies. I did watch the one that we were talking about the other day. I forget what it was called. Oh, The Devil Conspiracy, I think.
How was that?
So I liked it. I'm not going to spoil any of it. I liked it. It got really, really crappy ratings. I thought it was a pretty good movie. It's kind of one of those I need to see. Well, there's a lot more to it. There's a lot on the surface that if you don't know about the Shroud of Turin and this and that, I mean, dude, they could have literally made that thing a series. I mean, they could have made it a 20 episode series and just really gone down a lot of these rabbit holes, because there's just so much history behind all of this that people don't know, that they are trying to cram into an hour and 50 minutes, right? It's kind of tough. That it is very wave top. I didn't care for the ending. I'll put it that way. But outside of that, I thought it was a pretty good movie. I mean, we rented it, and I'm not sad that I spent $4.99 or $5.99 renting the movie. So anyway, I think in all of those movies that I just threw out there, that handful, you can definitely, I don't know that you learn anything about me, but I definitely see bits of me. The Passion of the Christ, man, that's another good one too. We gotta stop doing this, man. You keep throwing up that one there, man, bring tears to your eyes, dude. I mean, that there would truly bring tears to your eyes, or at least to me. But anyway,
so the Passion of the Christ just kind of it popped into my head, and again, like I
good
go back
transition.
and
Good transition.
yeah, I know. That was somebody, I mean, don't. I know you guys think I'm a nug, but give me some credit. And I don't think these, and again, like these aren't like watch these movies and you know exactly who I am. But like Luke said, you look at the themes in the movies and the messages in the movies, and you can get an idea. You're not going to know me 100%, but you're going to have an idea.
Actually,
right?
Well, one of these you probably Falling Down. That I think that has been our 3 lives for like the last maybe 3 years.
Well, yeah, probably since COVID. Yeah,
come on,
since
man.
COVID, you get to know me. But but when the Passion of the Christ popped in my head, and I can't believe I forgot about it. That and the Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston.
Ah, yeah.
That was those are such formative movies for me. But and I wanted to ask you guys, and Luke, starting with you, uh, you know, since you're, and I know Roger's a believer, and I know Roger, has talked about what he's doing while he's working out and stuff. He's listened to the Bible on audiobook and stuff. But Luke, with because you've studied a lot and you've dug into philosophy and stuff with when you were in college and everything. But I want to ask both of you, but I guess we can start with Luke. I'll put you on the spot here. Is so over the last year, we're kind of we're coming up on the anniversary of when my wife lost her mom, and it was it was it obviously it's been a rough year since, um and everything. And like I said, I've said it on here before. My mother-in-law, we had a very good relationship. We had a very good relationship from day one. A lot of people complain about their mother-in-laws and stuff like that. Like I never did, because we always had a really good relationship. But I, got to thinking, and the conversation that you and Roger had one night, I was already asleep because I go to bed at 7:30. I mean, we're already past my bedtime. Recording this, and so one of the questions that I had, it is it's shaken. I don't want to say it's shaken my faith, but it's definitely made me revisit some questions that I had early on, growing up. And I grew up, obviously Southern Baptist, and basically every Sunday at church was, we're all going to hell, we're all sinners, and we're all going to go to hell, and there's just no change in that. And you had the one AC unit in the old wooden church that was struggling to, cool the church, and everybody had the fans with the, on the front of it. It was on a wooden stick, and on the front of it was a nice picture and a Bible verse, and you sat there and you fanned yourself so you wouldn't, be a heat casualty. But I wanted to, kind of just throw out there, like, why does God allow suffering? Why is there suffering in the world, especially, and not so much with, and not so much with people who deserve it, right? And this is going to sound very unchristian like of me, but there are people who deserve to suffer. I truly believe there are people who deserve to suffer, and it's terrible of me to say, especially as I sit here and say I'm a Christian, right? And Roger's laughing. Roger's like, "Oh, you are going to hell. Your pastor when you were a kid was right. You are going to hell." But it's one of those things. It's like good people who are saved, good people who have been saved, who are washed in the blood. Why does God allow them to suffer? And I just, I've heard a bunch of answers, and I heard stuff, but I wanted to get your guys' thoughts, because I know you guys are believers, and just kind of curious of what you guys think, because we touch on it from time to time, but we really never like had an in-depth conversation about it. So, Luke, it's kind of what are your thoughts, if you care to opine?
Okay, Canteeners, listen up, because Luke the theologian is going to explain to you all why God allows suffering in 5 minutes or less. I'm not okay. The point. This is a starting point for the conversation, right? Why does God allow suffering?
Yeah.
But I do believe that I'm. It may sound like I'm deflecting, but I think the best way to try to tackle this, because it's a big question, right? And I think for me, the question's not as simple as that. I don't saying you're asking a simple question. I'm saying there are a lot of implications of the question that's asked. So basically, from a Christian's perspective, I grew up going to church, and man, they drilled the Old Testament into our heads, and that's where Roger and I, our conversation started. Was Roger said he was listening to the Bible, a few chapters at a time, starting with the Old Testament, and over a certain period of time, he will have listened to the entire thing. And I was like, man, that stuff was drilled into my head as a kid. And I started talking about, some of the stuff, I believe, or I've been pondering and thinking about regarding the Old Testament, specifically things like if any of you grew up going to Sunday school, hopefully the myth, or I'm sorry, the story of Noah, uh, Jacob and Esau, Cain and Abel, the Tower of Babel, so on and so forth. All of these stories. Um, I feel like I'm drifting away from Josh's point, but I think that all of this ties in together. So that's how that conversation between Roger and me started. But when I say that question, why does God allow suffering, is more complex. Again, I'll go back to the Christian perspective of it. Well, God is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent, right? At the same time, God is good. If you subscribe to the New Testament, that's a completely different law than the old law. That's the law that God's Son brought down, and God and His Son is one, along with the Holy Spirit. It's a Trinity. So, if Christianity is about love and God is a caring God, why would and He could God can do anything He wants because He's omnipotent, all the power, period. Well, why allow suffering? Why send anyone to hell? Why create a soul knowing for eternity? And that's a hard concept to imagine. Why create a soul knowing for eternity that this soul was going to be tormented and banished to hell? For not obeying God's will. That's a tough question. And I'm not punting this. I'm just saying that the question is a little bit. It's very deep. It has to do with the nature of God, really. And before I get into, because I could lay this out, because I could sit here and ponder it for a while, to verbalize it and ponder it. But I'm not going to do that. I hope we kick this around a few times, little short segments. But having said that, I think it's a question of the nature of God. And I would like to get back to why I think God, quote unquote, allows suffering. But before I do that, get Roger's initial thoughts, like on the nature of God, your viewpoint on it. And I haven't necessarily given mine. So I don't know, your initial thoughts on the question, Roger.
So I'll tell you kind of what I initially believe, and then just some things that you Google and look up or whatever, because I do not have hardly any. I don't have any Bible verses memorized. I can say, hey, you point to this, and I don't have any of that. So some of the stuff I've looked up, but I mean, off the top of my head, and this is kind of my short response to Josh in the text, is like, well, because we're all sinners. Period. Obviously, it goes a lot deeper than that, right? Uh, but there's two sides to this. So you have the one we're all sinners part, and there's a couple Bible verses real quick. Suffering is a product of the fall, a consequence of human sin against God. God allows suffering because we have free will. Free will being a big one that I think branches the two thoughts that I have. It is us choosing to follow God, provides perspective, right? And then when you get to Romans and James, suffering causes our focus to turn inward to face those parts of ourselves we might otherwise ignore. God can use suffering then to develop us into better people, the people who can love and enjoy Him forever. So that's the one side of like the actual sin. But when you talk about, and this is pretty interesting, and I haven't. So for those that don't know, because I don't think I've talked about it on here before, and I think I told my wife once I was doing it. But so at the beginning of the year, I started the Bible in a year, and I'm doing it audiobook wise, right? So when I go to the gym every day, they play a verse or whatever, and it's like 17, 18 minutes. And it's a Catholic. I'm not Catholic. I was raised Southern Baptist for the most part, but basically it's a Catholic priest. But anyway, they read the verse and then he gives like a 2 or 3 minute, interpretation of it or whatever. So it's not really pointed towards one denomination or another. But anyway, I've been trying to do that. And what one of the things that he said that was I had never really thought about, because and Luke, you were probably this way, and Josh, you were probably this way, and I know I did. Like when you look at, because right now we're in the Old Testament, when you look at some of the feats that happened, the parting of the Red Sea, and when you look at Noah and the flood, you look for historical proof that these things happened, right? For a lot of this stuff, and I think most of us, we look at it that way. We want to find that, hey, there was some Egyptian documentation that Moses was a person. You want to see that, okay? Because what that does then, it takes you away from faith and puts it into the fact category, because at that point you can prove it, which is not going to happen. But I think I was looking for the wrong answers, and I was asking the wrong questions because this guy, this priest, the way what he asks is, and he was talking about, I think, the Red Sea specifically, and then other events, miracles that have happened. He's like, well, is God man? Well, of course not. He's omnipotent, everything that Luke just said. Uh, so you consider God to be supernatural? Well, yes. Well, then there doesn't have to be any type of laws of physics that you can actually part the Red Sea, okay, or that you can actually get blood from a stone, or anything. There doesn't have to be any type of I guess, physical science laws that show that this stuff can happen and can exist. The cloud in the meeting tent, those type of things, because he is a supernatural, and if he is that we believe. Uh, he follows his own laws, right? So I don't know if that makes sense or not. It might be as clear as mud, but that was a very interesting perspective to me. And I think the other thing, when you look at sin, suffering, and everything else, going back to perspective, we value our time here on earth, even as believers, kind of as the end all be all. We say we believe in the afterlife and heaven and this and that. And I believe we truly believe, but I don't think, like, mentally, like, it's hard to picture your same mind, body, and spirit in that afterlife. Right. So I think you have to broaden your perspective, because I believe, again, this is just me. I didn't read this anywhere or find anything. Our time here on earth is a speck to God. Okay. So I think what we look at here is our end all be all, because this is what our conscious mind recognizes and lives through every day. Well, this is a speck on the timeline of eternity, like Luke mentioned. So when you look at the timeline of an eternity, uh, you know, the amount of suffering that happens here due to our sins and what have you is really probably very, very minuscule when you look at the eternity of time. So I don't know if that answered anybody's questions at all. I'll kick it back over to Josh. I know it's probably as clear as mud, but those are kind of two different thoughts that I was having. It's really changed my perspective over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. So, I mean, and again, I wasn't looking to. Excuse me. I don't know. I have the hiccups all of a sudden. I wasn't looking to get the question answered necessarily. It was just kind of like,
Snappy
Hey,
what
I
are
have
your
a
guys'
question.
No
I have a
joke.
question.
what?
Is it a sin to drink while we're recording? I was just curious.
No, man, dude,
Just curious. All right, that's all
Hey,
you got to
Josh.
say. Don't offensive.
wanted
Josh,
everybody to get down. What?
Josh, real quick. Your wife's pregnant. That scare you enough to get rid of the hiccups?
No,
Dang it. I tried.
no, no. So, no, I wasn't looking for the question to get answered. It was just more of a, uh, it was more of a philosophical one, in a sense of, because it was, again, I go back. Excuse me, man. Wow, that's pretty ridiculous.
Hey, why don't you hold your breath? Why don't you hold your breath, and I'll kick it right back to you. Maybe put a pencil in your mouth, drink some water, or hold your breath, put your tongue to your mouth, roof of your mouth, and swallow 3 times. But how
All
about
right,
this,
we'll do
Josh?
that.
So, how about this? I'll take over for you and then kick it back to you, and hopefully the hiccups have gone away. So, one question with Josh, to Roger's point, one question, and that's why I say it's such a great question, is it leads to so many others. And like Roger said, we're fallible. What is the limit of our understanding is definitely hamstrung. We're not even close to scratching the surface. But the first question, why does God allow suffering? I guess two questions implied in there. What is God? We kind of touched on that. Omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient. But what is suffering? Who are we as human beings? And there people been through some bad stuff, man. The three of us have seen some bad stuff. But what is suffering? Is that suffering? That's from a God perspective. Is that suffering? God obviously has a different viewpoint of what suffering truly is. You ask anyone who's been through ranger school, anyone who's been through any type of ordeal to get through something, tough. I mean, that's suffering, right? They suffer, not like losing a loved one or dying of hunger or, dying, of, in a fire, being burned alive. but there's a certain amount of suffering there. And I just think we look at it from a human perspective just a little bit too much. You know, and the nature of God is another thing. Roger's saying who says they have to obey the laws of physics and all these things. I tend to agree with that. It's a very broad question. You know, what is that new telescope they have now, Roger? I can't
Is it
think
that
of the name
web?
of it. Yeah, the Webb. We'll call it the Webb
guard?
telescope.
Yeah, I
But
forget.
that telescope, if you've been watching it lately, in some of the stuff they're seeing, this is shaking a lot of physicists, who have gotten their tenure, based on writing, papers and all this stuff. Those papers are based on theory. The Webb telescope is seeing things that don't match up with our current laws of physics, quote unquote, and definitely not matching up with certain assumptions coming from the theory of relativity. So it's like what I'm saying is there's a lot out there we don't know. The problem is humans, especially modern humans, is we think we know it all. But you take, a handful of people, 20 or 30 people, give them modern technology, and then travel back in time 3,000 years with just a little bit of modern technology, you'd be a god. To those people, you'd be a god. Pretty soon, Elon Musk is going to have the Neuralink thing, and you're going to be able to, do things that would be considered god-like. I'm not saying human beings are gods or anything like that. I'm just saying our understanding of even nature itself, and we're not even talking about supernatural, is just extremely limited. I'll say this though about my faith in particular. I'm looking at Josh. It looks like dang it. I'll say this about my faith in particular. My faith is pretty much unshakable. Like what I believe to my core is unshakable. But I'll say this, I'm very open-minded at the same time. I'm willing to put what I believe against, I'm willing to look at anything through the lens of a non-believer. And that's what I was telling Roger. Lately, when I've been reading the Bible, I look at it through the lens of a non-believer, specifically like the flood myth, for instance. I mean, if you think about it, you look at it from a literalist point of view, like not a Bible literalist, but like, if you look at back in history in Noah's world, for instance, how big was Noah's world? It was not big. Noah's world was not big physically. Maybe 100 miles square. A human being could not travel that far. They just couldn't unless they just constantly moved. Which, if you read the story of Noah, he wasn't moving around that much. So when the earth flooded for Noah, when the world flooded, what really flooded? I mean, I think it's completely plausible from the perspective of a non-believer that 100 square miles flooded. I mean, I can totally believe that. There's, it's totally possible that Noah gathered, 2 of each kind of beast within it, and it probably, trim it down to 50 square miles. Every beast that he could see or knew about or anything, he gathered it up, put it in whatever he built to get through the flood. I totally plausible. But what's really interesting on the Netflix special, Ancient Apocalypse, and I'd seen this before studying anthropology, was that almost every ancient culture has a flood myth. Every single one. So, looking at things from the perspective of a non-believer, most ancient civilizations lived near the sea. They had to, or near a body of water. They just had to. Nobody lived in the middle of the desert back then, not without a water source. So the majority of the population, I have no doubt, could have been some global event that caused a flood. Now, I guess what I'm saying, Josh, and it looks like your hiccups have kind of gone away, is just because a non-believer comes to me and says, see, science says this, it doesn't shake my faith in the least. It doesn't shake my faith in the least. It truly does not. I'm a Christian. I believe I'm saved as a Christian. Somebody might come back at me and say, well, what do you think about Muslims? I'm like, that's not up to me. It's not up to me at all. I'm not even going. The most important verse in the Bible for me is judge not lest you be judged. So basically the verse is saying, the same, measuring stick you put others up against, to get into heaven is the measuring stick that's going to be used for you. And it's like, okay. And I feel like I'm presuming, like, hey, is that Hindu over there saved? That Hindu that never heard the word Jesus Christ his entire life, is that person saved? I'm like, boy, that's really not my place to say. It's not my place to say. I'm not going to presume to know. I like to think I have a little bit more humility than that. So is Jeffrey, I'll take it this far. Is Jeffrey Dahmer going to heaven or hell? Boy, that's really not my place to say. Because that, in my book, that's putting myself in God's shoes. I'm not going to say, bro, that's playing with fire as far as I'm concerned. That's why I have a lot of problem finding a good church to attend. One that's strong in the word, strong in belief, but at the same time, not too judgmental. Josh still got the hiccups, but man, let's fight through it. I gave my little thing, hoping they'd go away, hoping to bore those hiccups away. But Josh, any thoughts?
They're here to stay. So I guess so my thing, and again, I wasn't looking to get that question answered, but I really, I wanted to ask you guys, because I know you guys are Christians. I know you're believers, and I know you guys have done more than just show up to church on Sundays and give the hominis dominus and then walk off and do whatever you wanted to. But Luke, you bring up a great point in that there's a lot of people that we look at. It's like, okay, are they going to are they going to go to heaven or hell? And it's like, and one, it's not for us to say, but if you believe, for me, all right, this is according to me. If you believe, and I think the hardest thing when you talk about, judge not yet ye be judged, the hardest thing for me personally is forgiveness, right? And it's in the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our sins and forgive those who trespass against us. I think forgiveness is probably the hardest thing for us to do. But when you go back and look at it, the person who wrote the words to Amazing Grace was a slave trader, and they repented, they were saved, and even somebody who did something as heinous as being involved in the slave trade, that, if you believe, for me, from what I understand, and again, I'm not a theologian, I'm a failing Christian, is kind of how I describe myself, who comes up short every day. That person went to heaven, right? And even though they did something incredibly heinous, because they were saved and they repented. So I don't know. Again, I don't want to, go all like super Barbara Walters, but it kind of brings up another point. And Roger, I'll pitch it to you. I can't believe I still got hiccups. I apologize to the audience. It's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous, especially when we're having a conversation this, I say this deep.
He
right?
didn't have hiccups all day. The hiccups come when it's time to record.
I know, right? And Roger's like, I got to edit this crap. Our production team is like, really? Are you serious right now? So one of the things for me, like, I've never been outspoken about my religion. Like I've never been within friend circles and close friends. Yes. People are like, we'll get into those theological discussions and stuff. But by and large, like, I don't go around prophesizing. And I don't go knock on doors and, do you have a minute to talk about our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ? Because I remember as a kid, people coming to my granddad's house and doing that. And my granddad, even though my granddad was a devout Christian, like, he went Sunday mornings, Sunday evenings, and Wednesday evenings, right? That's when he went to church. He was straight Southern Baptist, right? He was fire and brimstone all the way. But what do you tell people if you if you tell people, what do you tell people about the Bible? What do you kind of how do you explain the Bible to someone who may ask you about it or come to you and say, "Hey, I'm curious. I want to get to know um I want to get to know God. I want to get to know Jesus Christ." How do you put them on that path, and how do you get them, or someone who has lost the faith? How do you come back to that and try and get them back on that righteous path?
So to begin with, nobody's ever come to me and asked me to help them as far as like converting or putting them on the right path or whatever. Um, there's I it's not the right answer because at least from what I know, you should always. And I hate to use the term convert, but maybe proselytize or what have you. I mean, you should always look to spread the word of Christ and God and the Bible. Um, I think much like all three of us, I kind of steer away from that conversation. Unless it's brought up. Like I have no issues talking about it. I don't go out there and try to convert everybody I see. Now, if somebody wants to strike up that conversation, I try to, much like what Luke's saying, the one, I try my hardest not to judge. I mean, especially with my own family members, right? I mean, that's the hardest thing. But I try very, very hard not to judge anybody. But I don't think, I think my method or my method of conversion is more like, hey, look, I'm a believer. And here's two things. One, logically, it makes sense to believe in him. Because here's the deal. If you believe in him, right? Jesus Christ is my savior and I'm going to go to heaven when we die. And I'm wrong. Guess who won't give a shit? This guy, because I'll be dead and won't care, right? However, I do not want to be Stephen Hawking looking at the stairway to heaven and I'm stuck in a wheelchair. That's you know, that's the boat just from people look at logic and science and it's like, well, logically, if you're talking about that logically, it makes sense to believe, right? But then on the spiritual part, I just know that what I believe and what I think he's done for me, and that's what I can explain. That the sad part, and this is why I'm doing the whole Bible in a year, and hopefully I can keep it up. I think I'm on day like 78 or something like that. So I'm gonna try my hardest to keep doing it. But outside of the major stories that we all grew up hearing, I just don't know a lot about the Bible. Period. I think obviously I know some of the major fundamentals and principles of Christianity, and to Luke's, I know this is a little bit of a tangent here, but to Luke's, talking about, or comment about Hindus and this, not, I do believe that God, shows himself in many ways to everybody. Right. So I do believe that. That's just me, what I think. But, the best thing I can do is like, hey, this is what I believe. This is what I think. This is what he's done for me. And I tell you, and all three of us, I think, are in the same boat. I have lived a very blessed life. I know that. And some of it is luck. Some of it is hard work. Some of it is upbringing, and some of it is faith. I know there are some things that, man, it's the, I guess the best analogy, and I haven't done this, so I don't have a DUI or anything like that. I'm not judging anybody that does, but it's the guy or gal that gets caught drinking too much and driving, right? Some, I'd say probably 95% of the people out there have done something like that. Some people get caught, some people don't. I know it's probably a piss poor analogy, but point being, I know there have been some decisions, there's been some things that happened in my life that I know that, hey, look, somebody's probably looking out for me. Somebody's taking care of me. Somebody, whatever it was, guided me in the right path, made some certain events happen, this and that. Now, the other thing that you got to look at too, and this takes it to a different conversation, as far as when you look at God, and this goes back to the original quote that I stated, free will, right? And that is a very big difference when you look at Catholicism versus Protestants, is free will. And whether being forgiven for your sins is a process versus just a declaration or a belief. And again, I'm not an expert in any of this stuff, just wave top what I've read, things that I've looked at, and this and that. So part of when you look at God's power, could he make everybody believe? Yeah, he could, because biblically speaking, he talks about the other gods, right? He and he brings up over and over and over again. Man, these guys can't make it through the wilderness for 12 months without worshiping a golden calf. I mean, it's just the way it is. So he recognizes those other gods that are out there that are lesser than him. But it is it's kind of like I can make you worship me, but instead, I want you to worship me. I want you to have the love to worship me and have the free will in choosing to do that. Because it does. And what a lot of people don't, when you get to people that may not believe in God or Jesus or whatever, uh, for us, it is a two-way street, right? That's why you had the covenant. It is a two-way street. We give him our loyalty and faith, and he also gives that back to us. So, not trying to go too deep into it. And part of it is this, part of it's just we should have had one of our listeners, Ted, on here, because I think he actually majored in this stuff as well. He's real good in this stuff, but I know enough to be dangerous and probably know enough to nah, you're not actually going to make it through this gate because you kind of effed up all this interpretation. But I don't necessarily believe that, but I don't have enough knowledge really to get that deep into it.
Well,
Yeah.
so
And so, sorry, Luke. And so I had a conversation with Ted one night, and and we got fairly deep into into this discussion, especially with the first question. Why does God allow suffering? And Ted mentioned a law that was specified in the Bible, and it was something. And Ted, I apologize, I can't remember it because bro, we were like 3/4 of a bottle, deep into. Bro, it was I forget what it was, but it was a high proof something, and and so, but I remember the conversation, and and we had it, but yeah, Ted, we should have got Ted on here for this one for sure because he's definitely got some insight to it. I think he'll enjoy this one for sure. Sorry, Luke, I didn't mean to cut you off, brother.
No, it's all right. I bet that was an interesting conversation with Ted. Ted definitely brings a different perspective every single time, and it's always a good one. You may not agree with his perspective, but it's always a good perspective, and you always sit back, and it's not ever good to instantly react to Ted's perspective because I guarantee his is more well thought out than yours in almost every case, and it's definitely more logical. I can tell you that. You may not be right all the time. I'm not going to give him the big head, but you definitely need to think about what he's saying because it'll probably either change or refine your own perspective. Josh's question again, he is going all Barbara Walters because it does require a lot of self-examination. The question you ask, how do you talk to people about spirituality and your religion, if you will? And that's a tough one because I have my own little way of looking at life and looking at what it means to be a good Christian and all this stuff. And one of the cornerstones in my own beliefs on what it is to be a good Christian is the first thing I've got to do is get myself squared away so that people, when they see me, they're like, boy, that Luke's really got something going. He's a good guy. I want to be like that. I don't want to be like him. I just want to have my life squared away. I want to, walk about, with love in the heart and all these things. And the problem is, in order to do that, I've got to be I've got to believe myself that I'm squared away, or at least squared away enough for, someone else to look at me and be like, you know what, that's the kind of person that should be an example for the church or for the community, like being a good soldier, right? Good soldier walking through the airport. You don't want that kid to be all ate up with his uniform on wrong and, ribbons on crooked and all that stuff. You want to, be a standout so you look good. That's a soldier. That's squared away. That kid's in shape. The buttons aren't busting across the top. He's walking with his head up, shoulders back, with confidence and military bearing. Same type of thing, as far as, but it's a little deeper than that. It's just like, are you squared away? Or are you all ate up? You getting DUIs all the time? Are you, do you mistreat people? Do you do people wrong? Things like that. So getting my own life squared away is a big part of that. And I should try harder, because regardless, like Roger was saying, the whole thing about being a believer and being in salvation, believing in salvation, I look at it from a non-believer's perspective, like Roger was saying. It's all a risk assessment and threat mitigation. It's like worst case scenario. Here's the worst case scenario. If you believe in a religion like Christianity and you follow the actual word, not some perversion of the word, that's given by some minister, in front of a congregation. But what it actually says, if you follow that, worst case scenario, you've got a solid foundation of loving your fellow man, turning the other cheek, basically a peaceful society. If you believe that and try to live by it, you've got a solid foundation to be a decent person. And then you die and nothing happens. Well, at least you've contributed a little bit to humanity. You haven't tried to treat people the wrong way. Maybe you've lived with a family. Maybe you haven't, slept around on your wife and abused your children and treated your neighbors poorly and cheated and, all this stuff. That's worst case scenario. Best case scenario, you get through the pearly gates, right? It's just, again, a lot of this goes back to, for me, the nature of God, the nature of belief, spirituality, so on and so forth. I got some pretty crazy beliefs. You want to know the truth? I mean, I wouldn't say crazy, but it's like the nature of heaven and the nature of eternal life. The more I learn, the more I think, the more I'm like, you know what? Even if there isn't a heaven, guys, well, Josh is like, let's hear them. Well, that's kind of complicated because I haven't put any of this stuff down on paper, so it might come out as complete gobbledygook. It's just these ideas I'm forming in my head about what's the nature of my own belief. But let's say there's not a heaven. There's not a heaven. There's not a hell. You just die. People say, well, you just die and it's just a big nothing. Well, is it? Is it though? Because we're made up of the same material as the universe. Your body, even if it's just the body, if there's no soul, no nothing, your body, your energy is absorbed into the universe. You're part of it. You're part of the continuing cycle of everything at that point. And I tend to believe in positive, negative energy and, effects down the road and things like that. So yeah, man, I've got some weird beliefs on that stuff. I think it's kind of arrogant of human beings. We can't help it. We can't help but think about these things. It's kind of arrogant for us to think we can understand the concept of heaven or eternity or any of those things. It's just, I guess I'm open to anything. I open myself, I bare my soul. And I'm like, God, if I'm wrong about all this stuff, I really apologize. And if you're going to send me to hell for this, I deserve it, but I completely, when I have these thoughts, I guess you'd call it prayer. I have some weird thoughts on prayer too. Sometimes I feel like when I'm talking to myself, it's like thinking about things. That's a form of prayer. So I got to make sure that those thoughts and things are as pure as possible because God's right there. Whatever your version of the nature of God is in your thoughts. And you ask for guidance and things like that. But yeah, I don't know. I could continue to go off and deep and really go down the rabbit hole on that. So I think I'll kind of stop it right there. And Josh has another doozy for us as long as we're talking about spirituality. If anybody would ever, I love sitting around and talking about this. And believe it or not, this podcast forum is probably not the best way to do it. The best way to do it is for three people sitting face to face, bouncing ideas off each other. Like I was the other night, I was talking to Dylan, another non-listener, and Jesse, who listens as much as he can. And man, we had some really, really great discussions. And Jesse actually follows. I hope he doesn't get mad at me for revealing too much, but his religion is actually based in a very ancient Norse religion, believe it or not. And he was explaining that to us, and it made a lot of sense, and Dylan he's a very devout Christian, was listening to it, and we were having a positive discussion, no judgment. We were just bouncing different things off of each other in short form type short form conversations where it's like 1-2 minutes. Okay, this question is, well, what about this? What about that? So I love talking about this stuff. I love hearing other people's ideas, and there's very, very little judgment. So Josh, I know I'm boring the audience to death with these demented ravings of a madman. So why don't you throw that other one down, that other big thinker question down, and maybe Roger could tackle that one.
Yeah. So I'll throw this one to Roger. And again, I completely agree. Like, this is a conversation that I would love to have sitting around like a fire pit, with a couple of folks, and and having hours to talk this, because I could talk about this like you. I could probably I could talk about this forever. And I grew up in church and stuff like that, but I didn't necessarily believe until I was further down the road, right? And I think a large part of that was simply because it was because my mom pushed it because she grew up in church, every Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday evening. She was, devout Southern Baptist. And, Luke, kind of, jokes about the whole like drinking thing. And I remember, bro, I remember after church, we were what they call Buckeye Baptist. After church, everybody went out back and, there was a big potluck. Everybody brought food and there was a couple coolers. And that's when the Natural Light and Bush Light, got cracked open right after church. Hey, man, Jesus turned water into wine for a reason. He was down with it. So, but I didn't believe until later in life, and I think it was, and honestly, I really think it was probably when I went on, maybe my first deployment, and when I truly my view on the world changed. Before that, again, I read the newspaper when I was a kid and I watched the news. It was the local news at 6 and it was Dan Rather at 6:30, every night. And so I knew there was bad in the world, but you hear it, right? And that's one thing. But when you see it, that's a completely different thing to experience. And when I went when I went on my first deployment to Kosovo, and you start uncovering mass graves and stuff like that, and you see kids, especially kids, and and women, that have been butchered. I mean, that's a significant emotional event, and I think at that point was when it really like there has to be something else. Like this can't be it. It can't be all this butchering and debauchery and everything that's going on. There has to be something more to this. And so I think that's when I really, really started to believe. But anyway, so on that, I get my next question. And again, man, I fall short every day. But I like to have this. I like to ask a question. I like to have these discussions. Um, One of the questions that I have, and so you can go back and I pulled this. My mom is a huge follower of Billy Graham. She loves Billy Graham. She listened to all his sermons, all his books, everything, and so just by that, I got a lot of what he said and his teachings and everything. And so, you go to Thessalonians, Second Thessalonians, and you talk about the time of delusion that is spoken about in the Bible. And one of the things I was thinking about, especially for the last, I don't know, I say the last probably 3 to 4 years, but you could probably take it back further than that. And it talks about the characteristics of the end of this age is that people will develop a capacity for delusion rather than the truth, right? So are we living in the time of delusion that is spoken about in the Bible? And I'll caveat and I'll kick it to Roger, but and so I'm not sure how familiar you are with Second Thessalonians and everything, but it talks about like the delusions, right? And you could kick it back to George Orwell's, don't believe what your eyes are telling you, believe what the state tells you. Are we living in those times? It's not the end of times, but those times of, delusion rather than the truth. Do you think that we are in those times, or do you think that we're not in those times, or what?
I don't know. That's the short answer because it's hard to, especially when you just look at the news cycle and the access that we have to information today versus 40 years ago, 80 years ago, 120 years ago. It's hard to have any like objective perspective on is it more or less, right? Um, what I do see, well, I guess you could always say we're in constant decline, right? You're in constant decline until the second coming of Christ. So that, you know, long answer short, we're declining. How much farther we're going to decline is yet to be seen. What I do see though is that uh, there is definitely, I mean, and I don't even know what the numbers are. I mean, Luke, you may have a better grasp of it, but as far as when you look at folks that believe in a higher being, that believe in God, that believe in Jesus, and this and that, it's getting smaller and smaller. And one of the things when you talk about delusion and all these other things that these atrocities that happen, one of the things that religion does, and I'll just say religion as a whole, generally speaking, it provides you a moral compass. Okay, it provides you a moral compass, no matter, because and I get it. You're gonna have people, well, Muslims, they talk about killing people that are infidels and this. I get it. In general, most of them provide some type of moral compass. And when you look at especially Christianity, I mean, all of us are failing Christians, but the tenets are pretty basic. I mean, you kind of get it. Now there may be some nuances there, but generally speaking, hey, you don't kill anybody. Generally speaking, you don't steal anything, right? You don't cheat on your spouse. You're good to your neighbor. You spread the gospel and this. I mean, it's pretty basic rules to follow, but I think that what we miss, and again, I don't know if it's a sign of the end of times or whatever, uh, but we're lacking morality, man, and we're lacking morality because there is no compass, or that compass is just going around and around and around, and not pointing to anything. And that's what worries me the most. It's not even about when you talk about politics. I mean, we could sit here and argue left, right, center, Democrats, Republicans, whatever, fiscal policy and this and that. But what scares me the most is the lack of morality. And daily, I try to do what I think's best, not just for me. What is the best thing? What would a good Christian do? Okay, that's what I try to do. That's how I try to live my life. Now, obviously, you have to look out for yourself and you have to look out for your family. And I'm not going to put my family in the poorhouse to necessarily help another family out just for the sake of doing so. But generally speaking, I try to live my life the best way I can, with what I think a good Christian would do. Unfortunately, I don't have the feeling that 50% of the people live the same. And I think that's a problem, and I think it's a big problem. And I think that ultimately will lead, you know, I mean, who knows, man? When you look at the decline of religion as a whole over the last 20, 30, 40 years, and especially with the internet and stuff like that now. I mean, I'm going to change the question a little bit. You can kind of dovetail into what Josh was asking, but how much longer do you think religion is going to be around, as we know it? Because I see it in my kids. One of the things I tell them, and I try not to push my kids too hard with it, but what I do tell them is like, hey, you need to be a believer in Christ. I know my son is. Uh, my daughter, the one who's in school, I know she is, but I think there's a little bit more of the science piece that kind of gets involved of it, which, I was like that too at her age. You want to look for logic behind things and signs and this and that and proof. And well, again, that's, if there was proof, it wouldn't be called faith, right? So I think, for everybody, something happens to them. Hopefully you experience something that brings you to that side. But when you look at civilization across the board, especially what I see here in our country, morality, man, is on decline. There is no moral compass anymore. So I know I veered a little bit off of what Josh was initially asking, but I'll throw it to Luke with what he was saying versus how much longer is religion going to be around in the form that we know it or are
I don't think
familiar with it?
I don't think you veered from the point at all. Actually, I think what you were saying is part of the whole thing. A quick thought before I get into the times of delusion about religion going away. It's not going away. Christianity may be going away, but religion, worship of something, is not going away. That is hard baked into our brains. And these morons who think, oh, we don't need religion, bro, you're just going to worship something else. Whether that's climate change, whether that's the coming, artificial intelligence, revolution
Yeah,
that's
good
going to
call.
come on
Good
us
call.
real quick. They're going to worship something. The question is, what, like you were saying, what's the solid foundation that religion is going to be built on? If you look at religion throughout the years, specifically the old law, specifically Islam, those two specifically, those are not only the way, to worship your God and all that stuff. That is a way to live your life to sustain a society, to make sure that society is not going to be wiped off the earth by plague. You look at the old law, people are like, oh, it's just the 10 Commandments. No, bro, it's not just the 10 Commandments. There's an entire book in the Old Testament that's just laws about how the chosen people, the Israelis, Jews, whatever you want to call them back in the day, were supposed to live their daily lives. If there's mold, if you find mold in your house, if you find mold on your clothes or your blankets or whatever, you burn them. Though there, a lot of those are sanitary laws. A lot of the laws on what they can and can't eat were based on sanitation. They really get into the weeds. So Islam is the same way. Not and Islam though is not. This is why I don't necessarily agree with a lot of the tenets of Islam. Is not only is it a way to live your life, it's a system of government. And I personally believe that when you combine when people say, Josh, when people say that, oh, religion has caused more wars than anything in the history of mankind, I disagree. I think that when religion is combined with a system of power and or government, that's what causes the war. When power over people, borders, so on and so forth is combined with a belief, that's what causes the wars. So I don't think religion is going anywhere. It's just, will the religion be based in, does this make us a stronger society? I don't know. And it's scary if the religion comes about that's more of a, like a pagan, uh, narcissistic, slash, I can't think of the term, is destroy everything. Like, Satanism is not a real thing, but Satanism is based on hedonism, which could be seen as a worshiping the flesh, worshiping yourself. Human beings are or worshiping an AI, whatever, worshiping technology. So let me read this verse real quick. 2 Thessalonians 2, 9-12. The coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan with all power and false signs and wonders, and with all wicked deception for those who are perishing, because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. Therefore, God sends them a strong delusion, so that they may believe what is false, in order that all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. So, I mean, do I believe that we're within the time of delusion? Sure, I absolutely do. Now, the follow-up question to that is, do you believe we're in end times? I believe we're in end of something times. Do I believe that, there's going to be trumpets in the sky and, it's going to go exactly as the book of Revelation says it's going to go? I don't know. Maybe. In my mind, probably not. I tend to believe we're living in more of a time of the Tower of Babel myth, the Tower of Babel story, where all mankind came together. They set aside their differences because they believed that they could be as good as God. They believed they could be as great as God. So they started building a tower to the heavens. It's all a myth, is what it is. Did it literally happen? I don't care. It's in the Bible, Luke, but it might not have happened. Well, it's a myth, and there's always truth in myth. You got to suss out what's going on, and what happened when, the Bible says that, God cast down, everybody started speaking a different language overnight, because everyone back then was speaking the same language. They could come together for a common cause, build a tower to the sky to be as big as God, to be as good as God, to be as powerful as God. And what happened? Everything splintered because everyone started speaking different languages. I am telling you, we are not too far from everyone speaking the same language. That's going to come through AI, powerful computing. You use Google Translate lately on your phone. We are 2 to 5 years away from you having an earpiece. There will be no need for translators anymore. Now, I'm not getting all apocalyptic or anything, but I am saying there's a lot going on right now. That people like us who, came up, with some traditional ways and things like that, we're like, what in the actual F is going on? Transgender story hour, combined with, X, Y, and Z. It sure seems like end times. But Josh, yes, to answer your question, I do believe we are in a certain time of delusion. But I'll say this also. I think throughout history, there have been other times of delusion that preceded massive upheaval. So that's kind of what I think. I think everything is a cycle. I don't think that, and I could be completely wrong. God, strike me down, and if I go to hell, whatever. I think there's a certain arrogance for us thinking, oh, well, we're the last ones. We're the last ones. It's us. We're the ones. we're the ones that are so bad that we're going to be wiped off the planet and all this stuff. Jesus is going to come back because we're so bad. I mean, I don't know. I think there's a certain arrogance there. I do think, though, that it's all there in black and white. There are certain signs of, the coming upheaval. And I definitely think a lot of those signs are there. I'm not even going to say it's going to happen in the next 50 years, but it's going to happen. And I'll kick it to you on that. I hate to be I hate to be the voice of rosy cheeriness, but
Man, you
just
guys
what
are
I
like
believe.
Debbie Downers and stuff.
Right? I know, right? Usually I'm the negative Nancy, and here's Luke, over the top rope with the people's elbow,
Fire and
talking about
brimstone.
it. Yeah, fire and brimstone. That's right. No, I hear what you're saying, and I don't believe we're in the again. I don't believe we're in the last days, and and everything either. But I do believe that I definitely agree we're in a time of delusion, and what language we're going to be speaking is to be seen. And, a lot of this stuff too, like I was I was young, and I wanted to put logic behind everything. And I don't know, maybe not everybody goes through that period. I went through that period to where, even though I was raised in church, even though I was raised to, hey, Jesus Christ is the word, and, is the Lord and Savior, and everything. And this is the way, uh, I definitely questioned it. And I went and read the translations of the Dead Sea Scrolls and everything. And, eventually, but like I said, I got to the point to, you know, I think as a teenager, you question everything, right? Anything your parents tell you. I think it's just that teenager phase. Everybody goes through to a certain point. You question it. You're like, okay, well, how do you know though? Like, how? Like, I need some proof. Like, I need something. I need you to tell me something. But then you see things that change your perspective, like I talked about earlier, and then you see other things that there's no explanation for it. There's simply no logical explanation for it. And like Roger said, that's where your faith comes into play. And so I guess the last question I'll ask, and I'll ask this to Roger, again, because, I go back to my original reasoning for even bringing this up. Because there's probably some of our listeners, and maybe they're like, I don't care about this conversation. I don't want to listen to this conversation or whatever. But I still I want to bring it up, and I'll ask Roger. And I brought this up to begin with because, like I said, lost my mother-in-law. Almost a year ago, coming up on it and everything, and it's been very, very tough for my wife, and I don't know how. I can do a lot of things, right? We can all do a lot of things. I can do a lot of things. You know, I can tell you how to do a number of things based on training and experience and stuff like that. But I don't know how to help her sorrow. Like, I don't know how to heal that. Like, I don't know how to do that. And it breaks my heart to see her suffer. It does. Like every day, and I know she suffers every day. Like I still have both my parents, and I can't imagine the pain that comes with that. The loss of losing a parent, and Roger, and I know your father passed away, some time ago. But what do you? How do you? And I don't know that you ever heal that. I know that's probably that's a fact. You can't ever replace that. You can't ever heal that. You can't ever get back to you know to replacing that. But what do you tell somebody who has lost the faith, who questions the faith now, who comes back and says, why would God do this? Why would this happen? Why was this allowed? It kind of goes back to, I guess, the original question, why does God allow suffering? But for somebody who has lost the faith a little bit, what would you tell them if they came to you and said, I don't know that I believe anymore because of because of this?
So I'll tell you, I don't have a good answer for it. My answer is probably not based necessarily on religion. So for those that don't know, so my dad passed away when I was young. I was 25. He passed away 5 days after I got married. So the what people that go through that, and I can probably attribute this to the military, and just maybe we just got lucky with the guys that we were around, the lady and the women that we served with, and the units that we were with. You got to move forward. You got to suck it up, and you got to move forward. And I tell you that I know it sounds bad, but here's the thing: I never questioned my faith, even when my dad passed away. And I'm not saying I'm right, wrong, I'm holier, or I'm not saying any of that stuff. I'm just saying for me when it happened, when my dad passed away, it never I never questioned my faith. I truly believe that there is a plan. I think I understand it better now than I did back when I was 25. When I was 25, full of piss and vinegar and this and that. But it's like, hey, again, it's that mentality. You just got to keep moving forward. You have to keep, and that's more the healing part, right? You just, yeah, it sucks. You'll never recover from it. It will always be there. It will always hurt. But I can't sit there in the corner and just let them keep beating on me. Like, you have to move forward, period. Because you're either going to lay in the corner and die, or you got to get to where you're going, or at least try to get to where you're going, right? I mean, that's the non-religious answer. For the, on the religious side of it, it truly didn't shake my faith. But as and I'm not, the listeners out there, the ones that have stuck with us this long, that are like, most of them probably check the hell out. But the going back to this whole podcast thing that I've been listening to, I am learning from it, or at least what I think anyway. And I am starting to wrap my head around our timeline here on Earth is just a speck. And so, it kind of goes back to, like Luke was saying, what is suffering? It's all perspective, right? What is suffering? That speck, when you look at if you believe we're all going to be together, and we're going to heaven when we die, the speck that, I was without my father for however many years that ends up being, 50, 60, 70 years. Well, that compared to eternity is nothing, right? Because in theory, we're all going to be back together again. At least that's what I believe. So, I don't have a good answer on the faith side or the religious side, because I just never lost my faith. But I've always, you know, and maybe it was just blindly following, like, hey man, I've been a believer, always have, for the most part. I think maybe when I was younger is more blind following versus now, where I'd like to believe it's more of an educated following, and a more I guess what's the term, deliberate following, as opposed to just doing it because I'm supposed to, or doing it because my parents told me to go to church and that's just what you're supposed to do. But it never did shake my faith, even to this day, and even to this day when I try to pray every night. Some prayers, like Luke said, some prayers are better than others. Some prayers I've had a couple drinks and, God, I'm sorry about that. I might repeat it 3 or 4 times, but, I pray for my family. I still pray for him, and it's, whether he's, you can get into the whole angels and spirits and whether you think he's there or not here or whatever. Uh, but I do believe there is a connection there, even though my answer is not necessarily a religious one. The moving forward, I think that does help with the faith piece, because that's the first thing that people fall back on is, why would God do this to me? If I'm a good Christian, my mother's a good Christian, my father's a good Christian, whatever. We're good people. We try, we try our best to live, the way we're supposed to live. Why would he do this to me? So I think it was my attitude that I have to move forward and I can't just sit there in a corner and die. I think that did help out on the faith side of things, because I necessarily didn't sit there and reflect on the past. It was like, hey man, I obviously was hurt, emotionally, mentally, physically, every possible hurt that you can think of. That was me. But there is we have a term, right? You got to get off the X. You got to get off the X, and you got to keep moving. And I think that helped me out on the face side. I say that, retrospectively, obviously looking back at the time, I probably didn't know what the hell was going on, but looking back, I've had 2 decades now to kind of contemplate that stuff. I'd like to think that's what kept me forward. And I think it ultimately probably did help my faith.
That's a tough one, Josh. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking about it, like staring off into space and thinking about, how to answer that question in the context of what you and Roger just talked about. And fortunately or unfortunately, I haven't had to deal with the loss of a very, very close one. If you know what I mean. Lost people, everyone has, but I haven't had to confront that yet. Uh, but we do know it's coming, obviously. And I think that my family and I and my wife and I are fortunate to see it coming, if you will. We were real close when real close to our parents. Obviously, we were right there when all of our grandparents passed away, so we got to see the way our parents dealt with that. And I'm fortunate enough to have a family, and we're very open, and we communicate about those kinds of things. And I don't know. I mean, I take Roger's approach a lot, and sometimes I'm a big talker right now, and I'm a big thinker as far as, oh, I'll be fine. I'll be fine because this is what I'm ready for it and all this stuff. But man, I can't get ready for that. You just can't get ready for that. But getting your mind, getting your mind in the headspace where, well, it is going to happen. I think, semper paratus, right? Always be prepared, prepare to be put in that place. As far as, what do you say to someone whose faith is shaken, especially a loved one who doesn't want to hear, you know, and Roger, I don't mean this as a slide on you and what you just said. It's hard to say to some types of people. In fact, it's hard to say to some types of people, well, you know what? You just got to keep moving forward. Because one of the most insensitive things I ever heard was, when my dad had lost her father, my mom had lost her father. She was real close to her father. And, I heard someone telling her how they dealt with the loss of their mother. And I just thought it was a real insensitive, because she was trying to share how she felt about it. And this person was coming back at her, well, you don't need to feel that way because according to God's plan, that. And that's not what she needed to hear. What she needed to hear was she just needed to vent. And what she needed to hear was somebody saying, you know what, that's totally normal. That's totally normal. And the person that she was talking to at the time was a male, of course. And we as males are always trying to find a solution to the problem. We joke about that very often. It's like the wife comes to you and she's all upset about whatever, and you go straight to the solution. They don't care about the solution at that point. They just want to be heard. And I think that's part of the healing process, with males and females, honestly. You just want to be heard. You just want to have to suffer. The stages of grief. 1 year is not a long time, to deal with the loss of a loved one, yeah, Josh just says, is this a listening problem or a fixing problem? I mean, I think it's a little bit of both, and the fixing portion of it is, begins with the listening, I would think. I mean, we're laughing about it, but it's true, and it's so hard for us just to sit there and listen and be like, yep, that's right. And man, I'm talking to myself more than both of you guys, because I go immediately to the solution. Okay, there's something I'm not doing right because there is a solution here, but in reality, you just got to sit there and be like, yep, and try to, empathize with that situation. And you're, in a situation where, like, the one you described, there's a bit of sympathy that goes there too. It's not just empathy. So, man, that's tough. Someone whose faith is shaken, that's a
But
tough
you're
one,
right.
man.
It is both, and I think that's what people forget is it is both. It is, uh, you do have to listen and you have to fix. And I guess that was my point is like, hey, you're going to feel shitty. I mean, that never stops. I mean, even to this day, you get me a couple drinks and, I start listening to some old records that me and my dad used to listen to, man, I'm bawling like a little schoolgirl, so I don't know that you ever get over it. But it is part of the healing process to where you do have to move forward, even though you're feeling crappy. And I know, like Luke says, even as I say this again, it just sounds worse and worse every time I say it. But it's I think you're spot on. It is both. Like, hey, you can move forward, get off the X, and still feel shitty, and still do what you got to do to emotionally cope with it, right? So I think you're spot on with it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Any of that, did we, I don't know if we answered anything just now.
No, again, it wasn't. And here, I mean, here's the thing with all these questions, right? It wasn't meant to, all right, we're going to answer these questions for us. you're going to answer these questions for me. We're going to answer these questions for anybody. It was really just, as Luke put it at the very beginning, it's just to start a conversation. It's a jumping off point, right? It's a launch pad to start a conversation, because these are the conversations that you have in person, sitting around a fire pit with a bottle of bourbon or something, when you got hours to pontificate about the meaning of life. And is there something else? Is there more to just this, to just our earthly thing? What you got, Roger?
You talk about like the 22 a day and stuff like that. I think stuff like this is therapeutic. Whether they listen to our podcast or not, which maybe that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna send this to the VA and tell them this is our solution to 22 a day. But you're absolutely right. It's like, it's the whole, remember like back in the day, oh, you don't want to ask them if they're suicidal because that will make them commit suicide. Well, no, you need to have the conversation because the talking is what helps, right? And it won't solve everybody's problem, and it's not the solution for everybody, but you just start, man. You just start, and I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah, 100%. And you bring that up, and the therapeutic part is just the talking about it. Like I said, I mean, this is a conversation you have with some close friends around a fire pit, talking about it, or just whether you're talking about it or whether you're writing about it. Even the book, that Luke and I put out, it was that in itself, and some of the stories in there, some of the stories are funny, some of the stories, about me pooping on myself, and everything, those are hilarious. And then there were some stories in there that weren't so funny, but it was therapeutic. Absolutely, 100%. Just like you said, it was absolutely therapeutic, and a large part of that is just talking about it and just getting it out. Instead of keeping it bottled up, because it's going to manifest itself in some way, shape, or form. And you want to try and you want to position it to where it manifests itself in a non-negative way. Obviously, suicide, or some other behavior that's not as positive. So yeah, it definitely wasn't looking to solve the world's problems, or convert anybody, or anything like that with this. It was just to kind of start a conversation, have a conversation we really haven't had on this podcast thus far. And we're what, 114 episodes in now, 115 episodes in now. um you know so, but in whatever religion you prescribe to, I think, whether it's the right one or the wrong one, and like Luke said, I that's not for me to say. It's not for us to say. It's, what do you think? That's what, I kind of push it back to some of the folks when they ask. Because they've got some friends who don't necessarily believe, and they ask, "So, well, how do you know?" Well, I know a couple of things. I know from what I've read. And, Luke brought up a great point, and it was like, talking about the flood and Noah. To what Noah knew, that was the world, that was the earth. You know. Now, was it regional? Was it global? It was probably regional, but that's what Noah knew, and that's what the word was written on. And to encapsulate what Roger said, hey man, if I'm wrong, great. I die, nothing happens. That's it. That's it. But if I'm right, then you have eternity. And you know, I would rather be behind those pearly gates. I'd rather be on the escalator going up than the escalator going down, and that's still debatable, and I'm saved. And the wife is saved. Again, I try. I'm a failing Christian. None of us are perfect. We're all with sin. Um, you know, but
Let me
at the end of the day, I at the end of the day, I I like my chances.
Okay, let me tell a quick joke so we can lighten it up a little bit. So, dude didn't listen to Culper's Canteen Cup, episode 114. So he didn't find the way to light, and he died, and he went straight to hell. And he gets to hell, and the devil greets him right there. And it's like, all right, John Smith, guess what? You're in hell now, but we're going to give you a choice on which room you want to be in. But all you can do is listen to what's going on inside. You can't look in. So John's like, oh my God, okay, here we go. So they go to the first door, and all he hears is like screaming of agony, screaming, just sheer agony. And he puts his ear kind of close to the door, and he can feel the heat coming off the door. And he's like, oh, okay, what's the second door, devil? The devil takes him to the second door, and he hears this John Smith hears this moaning, like this, just moaning, like, and he puts his ear to the door, and it's a little bit cold. It's cold, and this moaning just sounds horrible. He's like, okay, well, it's better than the first. What's the third door? So devil takes him to the third door, and all he hears is this low hum of mumbling, kind of like that. So John Smith thinks about it for a couple minutes. Devil's like, hurry up, make a choice. So John Smith goes, well, I guess I'll choose door number 3. And the devil laughs real hard, and he opens up the door, and as far as the eye can see, it's this pool of poop and pee, just like at the bottom of a porta potty at NTC, and it's just reeks, and the smell hits him, and it's warm, and across this pool of poop and pee, there's all these faces. There's all these faces that are just head up, just head up. Just their head is out of the water, just their face, like they're tilting back. And all of them are saying the same thing, real low voice. Don't make waves. Don't make waves. Don't make waves. So that's my hell joke. So, Roger, real quick, not real quick. Let's talk about this, because this is gonna be big, and I don't know when this episode is gonna come out. Probably early in the week, hopefully.
Yeah.
But it looks like that Trump might be doing the perp walk, like Josh predicted. He might be doing the perp walk. Been reading a lot about that. So, what are your thoughts on the perp walk? And that's first. But what I'd like you to address before that is, if you're a rich man getting in your 70s, 60s, late 60s, 70s, if you decided, you never would, that you wanted to be unfaithful to your wife and you were a public figure, would you pick a porn star? Would you pick a porn star? You're a billionaire. Would you pick a porn star? I mean, what? Bad judgment. Bad judgment. I mean, good Lord. So give us your thoughts on the bad judgment.
So no, I would not pick the porn star. I'll just get that one out of the way. The perp walk thing is pretty interesting, because I've listened to pundits on both sides, and pundits on both sides are like, this is all bad for the Democrats. They're like, you do not want to do this. You do not want to indict him. You don't want to go down there. And because essentially he would have to almost be like extradited. The governor, DeSantis, would have to, send him from Florida to New York. Otherwise, he could just stay in Florida, never leave, and theoretically he'd be fine. But it seems like the general consensus on the left and the right is for that district attorney not to indict President Trump. Because, here's the other thing. There's a lot of stuff going on with the Bidens right now, too. And so I think they see the tea leaves, they see the writing on the wall that, hey, this is going to go down a very bad road that we might not be able to recover from. What's interesting about this, though, is Trump was the one who initially put this out, that he was going to be arrested on Tuesday. Since all that news, the left, including the DA, has actually started to walk some of that back. Now, not to say it doesn't happen, okay, but it's started to walk some of that back. Because here's the thing, and this is the part that I'm not a fan of about Trump. It serves his base for him to get arrested. I mean, it true, dude. You think you've got issues, and you know what? I mean, all this stuff right here, he's got his own thing, but we've been talking about this for years. McConnell and the Republicans, they jack this thing up more than you can even possibly. I mean, dude, we called like every step of this thing. It's like all you've done is made this problem bigger and bigger and bigger. Uh, and with Trump, if he happens to get arrested, dude, he's probably going to be the 2024 nominee. I mean, that's probably going to happen. It's just it's incredible to me. So, it's almost it's a very interesting dynamic where you're like Trump wants to get indicted and arrested, but now the left is like, let's not indict and arrest him. But it's your left DA who's trying to indict and arrest him. But now it's like you got to flip hands real quick. You got to flip the cards real quick because it is going to serve as base. And for again, it's just all anecdotal and some things that I see out there and read, even for a lot of folks who are like middle of the road, not necessarily Trump supporters, are like, yeah, you indict him. I mean, they're almost giving him their support if that happens, because now you're starting to talk about a banana republic. This is what happens in third world countries. Okay, when you look at what the dude, I had a whole sheet of notes. We went down the biblical thing with Josh, which was great. I loved it, but I had a whole sheet of notes of like stuff to go down with this stuff because this administration, man, and it pains me to say this as an American, but it is a complete joke. It is a complete joke. Dude, we're just short of like becoming just like a reality TV show. So I guess whether he actually gets indicted or not, I would hope and believe that some powerful folks on the left that have the ear of that DA are probably like, hey, this is not the way to go. Now, what I read recently, I think earlier today, was that, well, some of the felony charges have already been dismissed or pled down to whatever. It's not even a plea down, but I have been reduced to some state misdemeanor charges, this and that. So I think you might actually get some like misdemeanor stuff that comes out from the state. I don't know you get anything like up at the felony level. But what's interesting, I think Josh was tweeting about this earlier. The guns are out on DeSantis. Everybody's already pooping on DeSantis about not making a statement and this and that. I'm like, dude, he hasn't been indicted. Like nobody, what are you going to make a statement out of or make a statement for? Nothing, right? Because even with an indictment, I mean, this is the problem with their politics now. Even with an indictment, I want to read it. I want to see it because I don't know all the facts. Maybe there is some credence to it, right? Maybe there is something there. But either way, maybe it's a big nothing burger. But for Ron DeSantis, he would be dumb to do anything different than, well, you know what? If he's indicted, then he's indicted. And I'll take a look at that when I get it and I'll go from there.
So here's the thing, though. I'd raise my hand first, Josh. I raised my hand. Wait your turn. So here's the thing, though. Whatever he's indicted for, did that happen in Florida? Does it have anything
No,
to
and
do
that's
with
the
the state
thing.
of Florida? Yes, exactly. So
It would be New York.
Right. So why does DeSantis have to say anything about it? See, all the people that are coming out with their knives out on the right, I mean, you're just betraying your position. I mean, we all know DeSantis is going to run. They're like, well, nobody's saying, what's the governor of Hawaii have to say about this? What's the governor of Iowa have to say about this? No, what does Ron DeSantis have to say about it? Ron DeSantis is a piece of garbage because he's not saying anything about it. But the governor of Iowa is okay because he or she, I don't even know who the governor of Iowa is. Kristi Noem's okay. She's not saying anything about it. It's so ridiculous. Why does he hasn't thrown his hat in the ring yet? We all know he's going to run, but like we said, he's playing a really smart game because everybody, including him, knows he's going to run, but he doesn't have to say anything about it right now, and I don't fault him for that. I don't expect him to say anything about it. Whatever. So, Josh, I raised my hand first, so I didn't cut you off, but you go ahead.
It's all good. It's all good, dude. You got in first, man. The whole Trump indictment thing and the whole, especially Ron DeSantis. So I'll table the Ron DeSantis piece, for a minute. So Alvin Bragg is the Manhattan District Attorney. That is the one that is apparently, allegedly, that is pushing for the indictment. Now, Alvin Bragg is a Soros-backed district attorney. That's how he got the position with Soros funding. He campaigned on indicting Trump. He campaigned on an anti-Trump platform. All right, so you already have bias there. Now, when you look at the actual alleged charge, right? Because there's no indictment, there's no official indictment yet. Right. This is again, this is all speculation. And a lot of this is driven from post that Trump posted on Truth Social that he was going to be arrested on Tuesday after an indictment allegedly on Monday, but it comes down to a payment to Stormy Daniels, a former porn star, current porn star. I don't know. I don't know if she's got an OnlyFans or whatever, right? She's a porn star, right? That Trump made, which Cohen was it's already, he's already in jail for some other stuff, right? So you have basically what amounts, it's misuse. The actual indictment will be misuse of campaign funds, which they're alleging that he used campaign funds to pay her off, to keep her quiet about their affair. All right. First off, do I believe that Trump had sex with Stormy Daniels? Absolutely. Like, I believe that absolutely happened. I don't doubt that for a second. Do I believe Trump gave her some money to keep her quiet in 2016 when he ran for office? Yes. I don't doubt that happened for a second. Right? Now, is that a crime? Not necessarily. Go back to our earlier conversation about religion and, moral stuff like that, right? Probably not something that, an aspiring Christian would do. But that's not illegal, right? It's not against the law. It's not something you put people in jail for. When you look at it at best, misuse of campaign funds is a misdemeanor in most cases. It is a misdemeanor. Here you have a district attorney, again, Alvin Bragg. He has reduced 52% of all felony charges under his purview to misdemeanors. Now you have him elevating a misdemeanor to a felony. So at best, it's already bogus. It is already a political hit job. When you turn that into the whole, Trump posting on Truth Social that he's going to be arrested on Tuesday and, charged with this egregious, overinflation of a crime, and people are basically, they are dragging Ron DeSantis over the coals for it. It's like, okay, well, what do you want him to comment on? There's no official indictment. So Trump has not been indicted yet. So the people who are like, well, Ron DeSantis hasn't done anything, he's the governor of Florida, because they're going to have to extradite Trump to New York to be arrested. Okay. So you want the governor of Florida to speculate on an indictment that hasn't been handed down yet, and then you want him to comment on the indictment itself when he doesn't have the indictment to look into and to weigh in on. That's absurd. Ron DeSantis is playing this right, not only as the governor, but also as a potential 2024 presidential candidate and potentially in opposition to Trump running as a 2024 candidate. Wait until there's an official indictment, and then Ron DeSantis can come out and say, say something along the lines, hey, as a governor, we're going to make sure that this indictment is congruent with the Constitution. We're going to make sure that extradition laws and everything is congruent with the Constitution before we allow a Florida, a resident of our state to be extradited to another state. This happens on a daily basis. Governors make these decisions. They comment on them. They opine on them on a daily basis. The people that are upset because Ron DeSantis hasn't commented on it, like Laura Loomer and a host of others, they're the always Trumpers that, they don't care what Ron DeSantis does. They are, they're anti-DeSantis. I've seen DeSantis called, a fascist, an establishment guy. Basically he's, Mitch McConnell, in a younger body.
Well, nothing's sticking.
That
That's the
does look like
incredible
it's a
thing.
girl.
It's like
Where's
Luke
that thing
said,
sticking?
he's playing this perfectly. Nothing's
Yes,
sticking because he's just kind of doing his thing, running Florida.
exactly. And when it comes time, when there's an actual indictment, if there's an actual indictment, then he can comment on it then, and he can say what he's going to say then. Until then, like you said, he's playing this perfectly. I'm not going to comment on something that's basically that doesn't exist. So
Yeah, man,
that's my thought on it.
I'm done with, it's amazing we combine spirituality and Trump into one podcast, isn't it? Good grief.
Hedonism.
Hedonism. So I'm gonna give some final thoughts on that. It's just I am right now. It's not so much that I'm done with Trump. It's just like Roger was saying. This seems like such a huge distraction. Everything that comes up. Josh said at the opening of the podcast talking about the SVB, Silicon Valley Bank. They're much bigger fish to fry than whether Trump misallocated campaign funds to give hush money to a porn star. I'm done with it, man. I'm done with all of it. They're bigger fish to fry. Put it to you that way. I been seeing a lot of listeners lately, and appreciate all y'all listening, and all the conversations we had that come from the podcast, come from this episode, come from that episode. People are like, hey, can y'all talk about this next episode? It's like, yes. And then we have every intention of talking about it, and then we never do. So, Rodney, Grant, Dylan, I hope we scratched the surface on Dylan. I guarantee he was yelling. He was pulling the old Teddy. He was yelling at his headphones today. That's not what we talked about. I have some comments for this, and y'all hit us up with those comments. It's just we love hearing from you. All the people we always forget about. Appreciate y'all listening. And Josh has one final comment, and then y'all just do whatever you want. It's y'all's show, not mine. It's C2 up in here. Josh, what do you got?
I just got one final comment. I'll kick it to Roger. He can close this out. One thing, shout outs. I want to hit up Paul up in Massachusetts, man. You pushed me a message earlier this week. About listening and you appreciated it and everything, brother. I didn't even know you listened. I just want to, Luke said it a million times on here. Time is the most important thing that you guys can give to us, and I really, really, really appreciate you listen to us, you taking time out of your day, because I know you're busy with your company and everything, and listen. So I definitely appreciate it. The other thing I want to kick out is 20 years ago today, one of the worst foreign policy decisions in the last 50 years began in Operation Iraqi Freedom, March 19th. The air war started that evening, followed by the ground invasion. And I want to throw a shout out to all our Operation Iraqi Freedom veterans out there. It was a lot of opinions out there on the war and stuff like that, and I've definitely got some of mine, and they're not very popular when it comes to Iraq and the justification for us going in and everything. But I tell you, any OIF veteran, you guys always have a place at my table. We all died a little in that damn war, so that's it for me. I'll throw it over to Roger.
So I know Josh kind of did a one-liner about it real quick, and I'm not going to go too deep into it, but you better start paying attention to the SVB fallout, because I tell you, when I heard Janet Yellen on the Hill, and we covered her from, I mean, here's the crazy thing. Like, remember when we covered Joe Biden's cabinet? I mean, these are things that we brought up, and I'll just summarize it for you. Janet Yellen basically said, when they were talking about, because with SVB fallout, long story short, FDIC is going to cover above and beyond the $250,000, which I don't have a problem with, because those are dues paid by the bank. They can do what they want. However, the government said that they are going to come in and provide 1-year loans to these banks at the previous valuation before the fallout so they, remain liquid, and yada yada yada. Those are taxpayer dollars, right? That's where I have a problem with that. And when they asked, I forget who it was, brilliant question. When they asked Janet Yellen, well, which banks receive this type of assistance and which ones don't, she basically came out and said, well, the ones that can lead to systemic failure will receive assistance. So let me break this down to you in layman's terms, because Kevin O'Leary, who normally stays away from stuff like this, has been all over this. If you were too big to fail, you will have no risk in your investment because the government is going to bail you out. So I would throw that, and this is rhetorical. So what do you think that does for a lot of regional banks? What do you think that does for a lot of local banks, mom and pop banks in the city, maybe some smaller credit unions, some family startup banks that are very regional. You get some out there in the Ohio, mid-valley areas. We've got some out here in Arizona. What do you think happens to those banks there? So if I put my money in those banks, that I'm going to be at risk. But if I take my money to Chase or Bank of America, and I've got nothing against Chase or Bank of America, but if I take my money to Chase or Bank of America, which I think we can all agree, one of them fail, that would be a systemic failure of the banking system, right? And I know that there is no risk to my money going over there, then why would I keep my money in a small bank? Why would I keep my money in a regional bank? I don't even think Yellen understood, they were leading her down this path, and I don't even think Yellen understood what was going on and what she was saying until, the aftermath. But that's what they think. That's what they're doing. Right. So, there's going to be a lot more of the SVB. I think there's another bank now, a third bank that's coming into trouble. And there's probably going to be a handful of others. And you know what? Some of them will receive the government bailouts and some of them won't. But I would tell you, it's Credit Suisse. We caught this stuff from the very beginning. And here's the crazy thing. I think the SVB CEO sits on the Fed board that's supposed to decide or help decide if these banks, don't pass the stress test. And oh, by the way, the Lehman Brothers CFO, she was the risk and security investment, director at SVB. Dude, you cannot make this stuff up. You can't make it up. You literally took the lady that ran one bank into the ground and put her at another, in another place doing the same job. I mean, it's incredible, dude. It's incredible. So anyway, I won't harp too much on that, but that's obviously been in the big news, and everybody's seen your 401ks take a beating because of that. So anyway, thanks everybody for their time. Hopefully, I don't know if we've got one or two listeners. Spence says he listens all the way to the end. I give him the shout out at the end. He's like, "Hey man, thanks for the shout out." And I'm like, "Wow, you make it that far?" Most people quit after the first 10 or 15 minutes. So we made it through Josh's hiccups. We made it through some Jesus. We didn't go into the church too much. I know Ted's probably cussing us out because he's like, you guys know nothing about the Bible, which is very true, but I'm trying. But we think, thanks to all our listeners out there, and keep your canteen cups tightly secured and full of good whiskey.